This is your tech news briefing for Wednesday, December 21st. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. This year, the European Union stepped up its efforts to rein in big tech companies, from passing new rules to threatening or pursuing antitrust cases. The moves have set up a series of fights between the bloc's regulators and tech giants that are often based in the US. In one of the latest examples, on Tuesday, Amazon agreed to settle 2 EU antitrust cases, both related to allegations about its treatment of third-party sellers on its platform. Joining us to discuss what all this action in the EU means for the global regulatory landscape is our European tech reporter, Sam Schechner. Hi, Sam. Always great to have you on the show.
Always a pleasure to speak with you.
So take us back through this Amazon case. What were the issues that the EU Commission raised here?
Well, this goes back a few years, actually. They've been investigating Amazon on a couple of fronts. One of them is about what the Commission calls big data. They were concerned that Amazon had all kinds of data about its third-party sellers, other companies other than Amazon that use Amazon to sell goods. They know what their prices are. They know when they change the prices. They know their inventory levels, things like that. And the concern was that Amazon was using that information to compete against them, to sell their own products. And we at the Journal actually had an investigation where we showed that some of Amazon's house products that were, according to some people familiar with the matter, actually based in part on some of that information. And then another concern that the European Commission brought up was the terms by which one of these third-party sellers could become part of Amazon's buy box. And the concern that the European Commission had was that Amazon wasn't playing on a level playing field with third-party sellers, that it was hard for them to get into the buy box without using, say, Amazon's logistics services, without using Amazon's warehouses and paying them extra fees. They were still investigating, but they had preliminary concerns that could have led to a statement of objections.
Okay, but now the two sides have reached a deal. Can you tell us a little bit about that agreement?
So the EU had raised these concerns, and Amazon approached them with a settlement offer. And actually, in July, they put it out for a public consultation. Amazon promised to not use the data from third-party sellers in any way to help its own retail business, but rather just to help the overall platform. And they also promised new objective ways of qualifying for the buy box and Amazon Prime, and a third-party trustee to monitor their compliance with this agreement.
Have we heard from Amazon at all about this deal?
Yeah, Amazon, says they completely disagree with the European Commission's allegations that what it was doing was anti-competitive in its descriptions of its business. But in the interest of moving forward, they made this agreement in order to keep being able to serve people in Europe. And as part of this agreement, they won't face any fines. They just have to change their behavior going forward.
This wasn't the only bit of EU antitrust news recently. We reported on Monday that it's investigating Meta over some antitrust concerns. How active has the EU been this year when it comes to clamping down on big tech?
Well, the European Union is positioning itself as the world's global tech regulator. They've, for several years, had privacy regulation called the GDPR that is among the world's most expansive and has been copied in many parts of the world as well. And then when it comes to competition, they have opened cases looking at alleged anti-competitive behavior by Apple, by Google, by Meta, by Amazon, which they recently now have just settled. And they have a new law that has come into effect and really by 2024 be applied to big tech companies that's supposed to basically level the playing field between these huge tech companies and smaller companies by creating a list, basically, of do's and don'ts for the big companies.
I thought the UK really wanted this position as kind of the global tech regulator. What position is it playing at the moment?
Well, the EU and UK have at times announced some of these investigations simultaneously. The UK obviously used to be part of the EU, and its competition regulator was essentially underneath the EU competition regulator. So now that they're on their own, they were and have been trying to strike their own beat and try to go out there as a global tech cop. There has been some political upheaval in the United Kingdom, multiple prime ministers, and so some legislation that they had that would kind of mimic some of the rules that the EU has actually already passed. Digital competition rules, new rules for social media are still in Parliament and haven't really advanced. And so that's left the regulators with a, narrower, older rule book. But they're still actively out there opening investigations.
This strict approach to tech regulation, it does seem in contrast to what we're seeing in the U.S., where the tech lobbying really paid off in terms of preventing unwanted regulation. What does this divided global regulatory environment mean for big tech?
Well, I think tech companies in general would prefer to be able to offer one service and one set of terms globally. The more they have to apply different regimes in different parts of the world or even different U.S. states, that's an additional compliance cost, and it can make operating their businesses more costly. And it's frankly a barrier to entry for smaller companies that may not have the same armies of lawyers that are available. That being said, in the U.S., there is some fragmentation when it comes to tech regulation. Federal rules, federal privacy rules, federal competition updates regarding tech companies haven't really taken root. But in California, there are some pretty strict new privacy rules coming onto the books. On top of that, there is some additional new regulatory action from the Justice Department and from the FTC looking at tech companies. So some of this pressure that had been coming from Europe is now, in some cases, potentially being led by the U.S.
All right, that's our European tech reporter, Sam Schechner. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Zoe.
And that's it for today's Tech News Briefing. For more tech stories, check out our website, WSJ.com. I'm Zoe Thomas for The Wall Street Journal. Thanks for listening.